If you've ever casually sifted through pocket change and pulled out a 1984 penny thinking it was just a useless 1-cent piece of metal, get ready, because that humble coin could be hiding something far more valuable and fascinating than you ever imagined. What if I told you that among the billions of 1984 Lincoln pennies minted, there are rare varieties and minting mistakes that collectors are literally willing to pay hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of dollars for, simply because of the way they were struck over 40 years ago? Today we're going deep into the full story of the 1984 Liberty 1 cent, not just its history and design, but why the ordinary penny you've overlooked could be a hidden treasure piece in the world of coin collecting, and how certain errors, mint mark oddities, and other production irregularities make these coins worth far more than their 1-cent face value. The 1984 Lincoln penny is part of the Lincoln cent series, which has been produced continuously by the United States Mint since 1909. This long-running series was created to honor President Abraham Lincoln on the centennial of his birth, making it the first U.S. coin to feature a real human being rather than an allegorical figure or symbolic design. Over the decades, this 1-cent coin has become perhaps the most familiar and widely circulated coin in America's everyday commerce. By 1984, the Lincoln Memorial reverse design showing the Lincoln Memorial Building on the back of the coin was well established, having been in use since 1959. In the early 1980s, another major change occurred in how Lincoln pennies were made: the metal composition. Prior to 1982, pennies were struck primarily from solid bronze, about 95% copper with a little tin and zinc. But due to rising copper prices, the U.S. Mint shifted to a copper-plated zinc core, meaning the coin's core was 97.5% zinc with just a thin layer of copper plating on the outside. The 1984 Lincoln cent was part of this newer copper-plated zinc era that had begun in 1982. The U.S. Mint struck over 13.7 billion Lincoln pennies in 1984, distributed between the Philadelphia and Denver facilities for circulation and the San Francisco Mint for collector-oriented proof sets. The Philadelphia Mint produced the overwhelming majority, over 8 billion coins, with no mint mark below the date to indicate where it was made. The Denver Mint struck over 5.5 billion coins, and these carry a D mint mark. The San Francisco Mint produced just a few million proof coins with an S mint mark, struck with mirror-like surfaces intended for collectors. Because of these enormous production numbers, most of the 1984 pennies in existence today are common everyday money. They were spent, saved in jars, turned into bank rolls, and eventually recirculated or melted for their zinc content. In circulated condition, most of these pennies are still only worth their face value, literally 1 cent, or at most a few cents when sold in lots to dealers who melt them for scrap copper value. However, from this massive sea of ordinary coins there emerged a fascinating world of error coins, varieties and numismatic rarities that can sell for many times more than a penny, all because of unusual production quirks, mistakes, or even inexplicable anomalies that occurred inside the minting presses. These errors are not the norm, they're rare exceptions that manage to slip through quality control and enter circulation or collectors' hands, and they're precisely those unusual pieces that can command premiums in the marketplace. Understanding why and how these errors occur requires a quick look at the process of coin minting. Every penny begins as a flat metal disc called a planchet, which is then fed between two steel dies bearing the engraved designs for the obverse front and reverse back of the coin. When the press strikes the planchet with tremendous pressure, the designs are impressed onto the metal, creating the finished coin. But if something goes wrong at any point, a die is misaligned, the planchet is struck more than once from slightly different positions, a mint mark is missing because the punch wasn't applied properly, the result can be what collectors call an error coin. Error coins differ from merely worn or damaged coins because the irregularity happened during striking at the mint, not afterward through circulation or mishandling. One of the most famous and valuable types of error that exists for the 1984 penny is the doubled die obverse DDO. This error occurred when the die that strikes the front of the coin was improperly created, having received more than one impression from the hub in slightly different positions. The result is an overlapping, doubled appearance on parts of the design. For the 1984 penny, the most dramatic version of this error is often referred to as the doubled ear variety because Lincoln's ear appears to have a shadowed or doubled effect, a distinct look that's easily spotted and highly prized by collectors. Two primary varieties are known: FS 101, where the doubling is bold and visible on Lincoln's ear and other elements, and FS 102, where the doubling is more subtle and typically visible under magnification. The value range for genuine 1984 double-die penny errors stretches broadly because so much depends on how strong the doubling is and the overall condition of the coin. Circulated examples of the dramatic doubled die can be worth several tens to a few $100s, while higher-grade uncirculated examples, especially those certified by professional grading services with brilliant original red color, have been known to sell for several hundred to multiple thousands of dollars at auction. Some top specimens in superb condition have achieved prices near $4,000 or more in recent years. What makes the double die errors intriguing is that they have a tangible visual feature that sets them apart from normal pennies. When you look closely at a genuine double die obverse, you can see the doubling in the lettering, the date, and especially Lincoln's profile, creating a layered look as though the design was printed twice at a slight offset. These are not intentional design features, they are mistakes that happen deep in the die-making process, and once identified, the die was typically taken out of service. Only the coins struck up to that point carry this dramatic feature. Beyond double dies, there are several other categories of errors and varieties that can increase the value of a 1984 penny significantly compared to its face value. Off-center strikes occur when the planchet isn't properly centered under the dies at the moment of impact, resulting in a coin where part of the design is missing or shifted. These errors can vary from slight misalignments to extremely off-center strikes where a large portion of the design is absent. The more dramatic and visually striking the misalignment, and the more of the date and mint mark remain visible, the higher the value collectors place on the coin. Off-center error pennies from 1984 can command worthwhile premiums, often worth tens to hundreds of dollars depending on severity and condition. Another type of error that collectors seek is the clipped planchet error. These occur well before the coin ever reaches the press during the blanking process, when the metal strip is punched into round planchets. If the strip feed is misaligned, the cutting tool can produce a planchet that is missing a curved or straight section of metal. When such a defective planchet is struck by the dies, it creates a penny with an unusual missing portion along the edge. The value of clipped planchet errors depends on the size and shape of the clip, and whether there's additional interest from other striking anomalies, but they generally bring premiums over face value, sometimes in the tens or low hundreds of dollars. Broad strike errors happen when the collar die that normally holds the planchet in place during striking fails. Without that restraining collar, the metal can spread out more than usual, creating a coin with a larger diameter and weaker details. Broad strike pennies are collectible. They often have a distinct look and can be worth more than standard struck coins because they represent a clear deviation from normal production. There are also repunched mint mark RPM varieties where the mint mark was punched more than once into the die in slightly different positions, leaving a shadow or doubled appearance of the mint mark itself. These are less dramatic than double dies on the full design, but are still varieties that collectors recognize and sometimes seek out for specialized sets. Some very rare and dramatic errors, though less commonly found in the 1984 series, involve struck-through errors where a foreign material accidentally lodged between the die and the planchet during striking. This can leave unique impressions or missing areas of metal that make a coin one of a kind. These types of errors often attract premium prices due to their uniqueness and collector interest. Proof coins, those struck at the San Francisco Mint with S mint marks and designed specifically for collectors, represent yet another segment of the 1984 Lincoln penny series with their own value considerations. Proof pennies are struck on specially prepared planchets with mirror-like fields and frosted devices, resulting in coins that are far more aesthetically pleasing than circulation strikes. In general, proof coins in average condition might be worth a few dollars each, but proof coins that receive very high grades from certification services, particularly deep cameo proofs where the contrast between frosted design and mirrored background is exceptional, can be worth tens to more than $100 in the modern collector market. Even regular circulation strikes of the 1984 penny without errors can have value beyond face value when they are in uncirculated, high-grade condition. For example, a standard 1984 penny with original red luster that has never been circulated and scores high on the grading scale can sell for several tens of dollars or more, particularly if it earns a top-end grade such as MS-67 or MS-68 in professional certification. Some individual examples in the highest grades have brought prices well into the hundreds or even several $1,000s, especially in the highly competitive market for condition rarities. What all these examples illustrate is that the value of a 1984 Lincoln penny, and indeed any coin, is far more complicated than its face value. While the ordinary coin that changes hands every day might simply be worth 1 cent in a retail transaction, in the numismatic world value is determined by rarity, condition, collector demand, and specific anomalies that make a coin unique or unusual. A regular circulated coin without any notable features is still just 1 cent. But a coin with a significant mint error that stands out visually, especially one that has been authenticated and graded by experts, can be worth hundreds, thousands, or in extremely rare documented cases even figures that seem almost unimaginable for a 1 cent piece. The story of the 1984 Lincoln penny and its error varieties is also a reminder of how market interest drives numismatic values. Coins are traded in auctions, collector exchanges, and published price guides where recent sales and auction results influence what buyers and sellers are willing to pay. For example, a dramatic 1984 double-die obverse coin that sold for a premium at auction sets a precedent that similar coins might achieve similar prices in the future. This dynamic driven by demand, rarity, historical interest, and collector sentiment means that coin values are not fixed, and they can rise, fall, or fluctuate over time as new examples are found and as market trends evolve. Perhaps the most exciting part of all this for many people is simply the possibility of discovery. Hundreds of millions of 1984 Lincoln pennies still sit in coin jars, rolls, collections, and drawers across the world. Most are ordinary, but some are rare error coins waiting to be found. The next valuable 1984 penny might be sitting unnoticed in someone's collection right now, waiting for a closer look under magnification. This blend of everyday familiarity and hidden potential is what keeps coin collecting alive as a hobby. The idea that the coin you've overlooked could turn into a prized piece worth far more than its 1 cent face value. So the next time you run your fingers through a handful of pennies and pull out a 1984 Lincoln cent, don't dismiss it outright. Examine it closely. Look for doubling, off-center strikes, odd clipping, or unusual features you wouldn't expect on a typical penny. Even if most 1984 pennies remain common and worth just a cent, the rare mistakes and varieties in this series remind us that what seems ordinary on the surface can be extraordinary at heart, and that a simple penny can sometimes hold a surprising story and unexpected value. If you've ever dumped a handful of 1991 Lincoln pennies onto your desk and glanced at them without much thought, you might want to do a closer, deeper look before you spend or discard them. Because what looks like an ordinary 1 cent coin could secretly be worth far more than its face value, sometimes hundreds, thousands, or even more in rare cases, all because of errors, mistakes, mint mark oddities, or unusual production quirks that can make a seemingly ordinary penny into something incredibly collectible and valuable. Now, we're going to delve into the full history of the 1991 Liberty 1 cent, how it was made, why some examples are ordinary while others are coveted, and exactly what kinds of errors and varieties can lead to dramatic value differences in today's market. The Lincoln cent series has been a staple of American coinage for well over a century, first introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln on the centennial of his birth. Its design, featuring Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and various reverse designs over time, has made it one of the most familiar and widely used coins in U.S. circulation. By 1991, the Lincoln Memorial reverse design had been in use since 1959 and would continue until 2008. The early 1980s had brought a major switch in composition for the penny. Before 1982, pennies were mostly bronze, consisting of about 95% copper. After 1982, due to rising copper prices, the U.S. Mint changed to a copper-plated zinc composition with a thin outer layer of copper over a zinc core, and this continued for the 1991 pennies. These coins weigh about 2.5 grams and have a diameter of 19 millimeters, and most that entered circulation were spent and re-spent like any other change. In 1991 alone, the Philadelphia Mint struck more than 5 billion pennies without a mint mark, and the Denver Mint made over 4 billion with a D mint mark. Additionally, the San Francisco Mint struck nearly 4 million proof pennies with an S mint mark for collectors, producing mirrored surfaces and sharp details for specialty sets. The scale of these mintage figures means that, in ordinary circulated condition, most 1991 pennies are just worth their face value, literally 1 cent, or maybe a little bit more when sold in bulk by weight in copper scrap because of the underlying metal content. But within this enormous mintage there are a variety of error coins and anomalies that escaped standard quality control and now command attention from collectors around the world. Coins are struck by powerful presses that feed blank metal discs called planchets between two engraved dies bearing the obverse and reverse design. Ideally, every planchet would align perfectly under the dies and come out as a standard, flawless coin. In reality, millions of pieces of metal, human actions, machinery adjustments, and high-speed production mean that mistakes do, and often do, happen. When a planchet is struck incorrectly, misaligned, struck multiple times, struck on the wrong planchet, or struck with a flawed die, the resulting coin becomes an error coin, and within these lies the potential for value that far exceeds 1 cent. Many collectors specifically hunt for error coins because they represent physical evidence of something unusual in the minting process, a glitch, an anomaly, or a transient mistake that should not have been released but for which quality control either didn't catch or didn't have time to remove. These variations and errors are what fuel the value differences between a common penny worth 1 cent and a rare penny worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on type, condition, and collector demand. One of the most discussed types of anomalies that can affect the value of a 1991 penny is a double die or double die variety. A double die error happens when the die used to strike the coin receives more than one impression from its master hub during creation, which results in overlapping design elements on the die itself. When this flawed die strikes planchets, it transfers this doubling into the coins it produces. In some years and series, these errors can be extremely significant and dramatic. For 1991, there are known varieties where doubling appears on the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, creating extra columns or repeated design elements inside the memorial. A documented double die reverse variety for the Denver Mint 1991 D penny is listed as FS01 1991 D801, and the most dramatic examples can show multiple extra columns in the memorial bays and additional anomalies that are visible under magnification. Collectors look for these features with at least 10x magnification to determine if a double die error exists. Values for coins with this specific variety depend heavily on the strength of the doubling and the overall condition of the penny. In circulated condition with moderate doubling, you might see values ranging from around $25 to $75 or more, while stronger examples in uncirculated grades with vibrant original color can command hundreds of dollars or more, with some top certified coins selling for well above typical circulated premiums. Off-center strikes constitute another error category that can add significant value beyond face value. When a blank planchet fails to position correctly under the dies, the press may strike it off-center, meaning part of the design is not fully impressed onto the coin. Minor off-center errors with only a small portion of the coin's design missing tend to have modest additional value, but dramatic misalignments where a substantial portion of the design is absent, especially if the date and mint mark remain visible, can be eye-catching and valuable. Some 1991 pennies with pronounced off-center errors have been known to command prices in the hundreds of dollars or more, particularly when the coin's condition is otherwise good and the misalignment is clearly visible without magnification. In some reported cases of substantial off-center errors, for example, misalignments greater than 50% values can approach or even exceed those higher ranges, though exact values fluctuate with collector interest and recent sale records. Yet another fascinating type of error variety involves wrong planchet strikes or double denomination strikes. The minting press is supposed to feed penny planchets into the striking chamber, but every so often something goes awry and a planchet intended for another denomination, such as a dime, ends up being struck with the Lincoln cent dies. This results in a coin that has design elements from a penny such as Lincoln's profile and the memorial, but is smaller in diameter and made of a different metal composition consistent with the other denomination. These are extremely rare occurrences and, because of that rarity, are often highly prized by error collectors. A documented example of a 1991 Lincoln penny struck on a dime planchet sold in the modern market for more than $2,000 in a certified grade, representing one of the most dramatic value differences possible for this series of pennies. Other combinations such as a 5% off-center misalignment on a wrong planchet have also been documented and have realized over $1,000 at auction, depending on condition and authenticity. These coins are the result of extraordinary mechanical or feed errors at the mint and represent some of the most valuable 1991 Lincoln cent error coins known. In addition to double dies, BIE die chips, off-center strikes, and wrong planchet errors, there are also other types of recognized varieties that collectors look for in 1991 pennies. These include broad strike errors where the collar die that normally restrains the planchet during striking fails, producing a coin with a slightly larger, flatter appearance, and die cracks where cracks in the die surface imprint raised lines or missing letters onto the coins. Strike-through errors occur when a foreign object such as grease, thread, or debris becomes lodged between the die and the planchet during striking, leaving areas where design elements are weak or absent, or where unusual impressions appear. While these types of errors are often less dramatic or less rare than the major double die or wrong planchet varieties, they still add interest and potential premium value above face value for collectors, especially when the error is visually distinct and well documented. Some of these error types may command tens to a few $100s depending on severity, appeal, and collector demand, and rare strike-through pieces or novelty coins with unusual characteristics can sometimes bring even higher prices in specialized markets. Ultimately, the story of the 1991 Liberty 1 cent is not just a simple tale of a small piece of metal changing hands in everyday transactions. It is a history of how coins are made, how errors occur, and how human and mechanical factors can create anomalies that turn ordinary objects into treasures. While most 1991 pennies remain ordinary and are still worth exactly what the mint printed on them 1 cent, the few that carry unusual features can surprise even experienced collectors. Whether it is a clear off-center strike where nearly half the design is missing but the date remains visible, a double die variety with extra memorial columns or overlapping design elements, a BIE die chip where a tiny flaw became a collectible variety, or the extraordinary wrong planchet strike with a dime blank that sold for thousands, these coins show that value in numismatics is as much about story, rarity, and demand as it is about age or face value. So next time you're sorting through old change and encounter a 1991 penny, take a moment to inspect it closely. It might be an ordinary coin or it might be a hidden gem with value far beyond 1 cent.